Museum Gardens in the heart of this modern, bustling city of York. But why here? Why was York set up here and not, say, 10 miles further north or somewhere completely different? Well, we've got the Romans to thank for that. The year was 71 AD. A legion of 5,500 men came up north. The previous stop was Lincoln, and then under Emperor Vespasian they marched north of the Humber. They were led by the Roman governor Quintus Petilius Cerealis, and they decided to settle here in York. Why? Because it was between the two rivers, the River Ouse and the River Foss. It sat on a ridge, so that coming in to the city was the main Roman road. Today, that Roman road is largely the A64. It was the 9th Legion that settled here in York. These, by the way, are Roman coffins, sarcophagi. And these were found scattered underneath the city here, and today have been scattered decoratively in parts of the Museum Gardens. You would have had to have been pretty rich, pretty special person to have had your own coffin. In fact, probably those connected to the military, because largely people in Roman times were cremated. So these were pretty rare in that extent. You can see made of millstone grit, would have been pretty durable. People often ask me if there were anyone found in the coffins, and yes, there would have been. In fact, there was one which the tale is Aelia Severa was the name of the woman inscribed on it, but when they looked inside they found a man's body. Here the coffins tell us, I suppose, a little bit about the height of the Romans. The men would have averaged 5'6", the women about 5'3", so not too much smaller than today. As for the population of Romans in York, well, I said that 5,500 people came up here, and that's pretty good considering even at the end of the late Middle Ages, when York was very prosperous, there was only a few thousand more people here. Roman Britain, however, there could have been anything between 2 million and 5 million people if you include all those scattered throughout the countryside. Eboracum is the name the Romans gave, and so everything in the city today has grown up from Old Ebor. Soon we'll reach the 2000th anniversary of the Roman invasion. York today is a city bearing fruit from all of those different centuries in between. It seems everywhere you look has a story. This little pub, one of many, that is proud of our rich history. The first Roman attempt at an invasion was 55 BC. Caesar, as emperor, was keen to make a mark, and Britain was seen as a new goal. They actually, initially, 10,000 men landed here in Kent. They waited for the cavalry backup to arrive across the channel, but there was a huge storm, so the cavalry never arrived, and as a result Caesar had to withdraw. Next year Caesar came back, and this time he was a lot more successful. A lot of the Britons retreated. He came here with a force of 27,000 infantry and cavalry and managed to work his way up through quite a lot of the country. What happened, unfortunately, was that there were problems in France, and so the army had to go back to France and fight there. It was almost 100 years later when we had the proper Roman invasion. So that was the year 43 AD. Initially 40,000 Romans landing here in Kent. Soon Claudius arrived with reinforcements, and they gradually made their way through the south of England. Dorchester, Chichester, Silchester, Cirencester, all coming from the Roman word castra, meaning fort. London, from Londinium, founded in AD 47, and gradually made their way north. There were rebellions. Boudicca woman who revolted against the Romans with her army. Boudicca was said to be very tall, to have striking red hair which hung down to her hips. Her army were eventually cornered and massacred, and Boudicca herself famously poisoned herself to evade capture. Largely, the Romans, as you can see, making their way north. Like I say, Lincoln was the stop before York, as they made their way up to the north of England, AD 71, AD 79. By this time, Britain was very, very Roman in its ways, just the general way of life, the religion, and a lot of the English people at the time, a lot of the Britons at the time, were Roman slaves. So you can see they worked their way up north. Scotland was a little more trickier. Hadrian's Wall there, built 122 to 139 AD. They had a few attempts to invade Scotland, and eventually getting as far north as the Antonine Wall, 142 AD. Many of the sarcophagi in York were found underneath the railway station. We found them in two lines, what would have been above ground and either side of the Roman road outside of the Roman city. So in other words, the first thing you saw when you came into the city was these, as a sign of strength, of numbers and of civilization. A baby coffin here. Whoever this was would have been very special. They've had their own sarcophagus. There were many reasons people could die young. Infant mortality was very high, and of course you had things like polio, TB, leprosy. However, the potential lifespan of the Romans could be up to 100. In fact, there was a tombstone found of someone who supposedly did live to 100, and quite a few of people in their 70s and 80s. Osteoporosis was uncommon back then. When they found the bones, largely they were in good condition, so the basic fitness of your average Roman was pretty good.